We've been on tour for 3.5 years, playing to wonderful audiences all around the world. It's been a life-changing experience making this body of work, and yeah, it's really been a full-time occupation. And then 18 months ago, we got together in a studio context, and we started making the sophomore excursion, which we have now as Ice on the Dune. When you're performing night after night, it does weigh you down. I do a lot of writing and short stories and things like that, but you know, getting into the studio in the middle of it all, it's hard to deal with it sometimes, you know. And the scheduling, if you look at our schedule, sometimes we'll be in Brazil one day, 2 days later we'll be in Sydney, and then we'll be in Korea, and then yeah, it's quite muddled, and it's kind of the nature of touring. You know, and certainly you do feel the tyranny of distance from your loved ones and your family, and I guess that sense of home. So you end up making a home in every place you're at in a small way, in any way you can find some kind of mindfulness. It's supremely important, I think. Yeah, there's a song called I'll Be Around, which is one of the last songs we wrote. And it's an interesting song from the point of view that it was one of the last songs we wrote, and I sat down with Luke in the studio and we listened to the first album in completion. It's something I hadn't done since we'd made the first album. I don't ever look back, I like to just move forward. And it highlighted a few things that we needed a few simpler moments. And for me, that song, it's pure heart, and it's the only song I listen to every morning, and it's actually one of the only songs I've ever listened to that's brought a tear to my eye. Music doesn't affect me like that normally. It's more films or paintings or other things, but I just think there's a lot of love in that song, and I think it's a nice message to each other, to Luke and I, and then to our loved ones and our families, and to the audience, that we will be around, that we're not going away. It was a long hiatus of 5 years to not bring new music, but it needed to be of a certain level, otherwise we didn't feel it was worthy of playing it to anyone. I write a lot of lyrics when I'm traveling and things like that, but for the most part, when you write, you know, a lyric, it doesn't always necessarily just come straight into a song format. Most of the time when we work, it's inconsistent in the sense that we always attack a song from a different angle. It might come from a sound, it might come from a new instrument, or a melody, or a beat, or just something very inspiring, like coming back from a great exhibition, or a film, or the opera, or something like that. So we try and keep on our toes, and I think it's very important for a musician or an artist to sort of, I guess, distract yourself so you're not conscious, you're not thinking about it, you're actually just in the moment, if you will. I know that sounds a little airy-fairy, but it's really quite true, because the more I think about things, the less good seems to happen. It's more an instinctual feeling, and we try and create an environment in the studio where things happen. There's quite a famous story of this American poet, Ruth Stone, who's probably one of the most famous American poets. And she talks about being out in the field in Nebraska. She's about 8 or 9 years of age. And she sees a poem on the horizon, and it's running towards her. She sees it, and she's right in the middle of the field, and she bolts, and she runs and runs and runs to get back to the house to grab the poem, and she just makes it and grabs it by the tail and writes it down. And it's perfect, except it's all backwards. And then she has to write it backwards. And she said that if she hadn't grabbed that poem that day, it would have gone on in the field and found some other poet, some other vessel to come through. And I feel the same way when we make music. Some people attribute these things to a higher power or something like that. But it does feel like some kind of channeling, And I know there's a new movement now in LA and South America of using ayahuasca, of a way of inducing some kind of other spirit within you. And they talk about all seeing this sort of heavenly woman kind of figure, and junkies and people with terrible diseases will go in and they'll take this treatment, if you like, and it's a 9-hour thing, and then you go on this kind of psychedelic journey, and you come out the other side enlightened in some way. And I think channeling, or there is some things that we can't quite explain, and they fascinate me. I was living in New York at the time, and when I'd moved there, I was lucky enough to work with a producer by the name of Phil Ramone, who quite famously recorded Happy Birthday, Mr. President when he was about 20. And he's done countless records ever since. And under his tutelage, I learnt and I met a lot of great musicians, really the top players in New York City. So I did bring a few of those guys in to play on our record, and notably Henry Hay, who's a arranger and composer. I set Luke upon this odd machine that I bought. It's kind of a prototype for composition, and you're able to create things that are vastly more complex than our training would allow to understand. But you can understand music and you make things. So once we created this, we needed Henry to really decode what we'd created. The show's already on the road, and just done a couple of successful dates from New York to Sydney, Australia, to, well, a few other places. I mean, it all becomes a blur at some point on the tour schedule, but it just feels bigger and bolder, and audiences in the UK have only seen us once at Lovebox Festival, so we're looking forward very much to coming back and playing Wilderness later in the year, and a few other things. But we always say, expect the unexpected. I would have loved to have toured with the Beatles and the Stones. It must have been fun. Yeah, there's a singer-songwriter from Derry in Ireland called Soak, and she has a song called Sea Creatures, and it's absolutely beautiful. I think she's only 15 years of age, and it's such a mature work. And to me, she seems like the next Sinead O'Connor. I do play PlayStation. I'm looking forward to the PS4 coming out. I love this game called Little Big Planet on the PS3. And it's great because it's more of a creative game. And they're the ones I always liked as a kid. The ability, you can kind of almost design your own game, and then other people can interface and play your game, which, you know, the more things that we feed our young people and, you know, young at heart people with creative tools, the better, I truly believe. I drowned when I was 5 years of age. For 5 minutes I was under the water, and my mother didn't know where I was, and then she looked down and she saw me. And I think that slight retardation in me has had a wonderful effect, because I've often found myself daydreaming, and I think something to do with that moment. And I do sort of, whether it was a dream or reality, imagine myself looking up through the water and just, I don't know, I find myself dreaming a lot.